So we
Thank
have
you.
everybody sort of signing in. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. This is our second edition of Collections Spotlight, which is currently going to be a weekly meeting with the Coast Center for the Arts and First American Art Magazine, and then a guest artist will be guiding us each week. The goal for this is to have weekly deep dives led by artists into pieces from the Co's permanent collection. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm Bess Murphy. I'm the curator here at the Co Center in Santa Fe. And I'm here on site all by myself with all of the pieces at the Co today. I have a selection of pieces that our guest artist for today chose to speak about. I'll let her do the introductions and say why she chose those pieces. But just wanted to, while everybody's gathering in, let you all know just one thing that might come up, which I mentioned last week, but in case you weren't here and you're new to us and you're new to the Co, I don't have gloves on, and there is a reason for that. And I just want to let everyone know. At the Co Center, we generally handle all of our collection without gloves, at least the pieces that we can. There's a few here and there that we do wear gloves with, but the vast majority of these pieces we feel are actually more safely handled without gloves, mediating between us. And we also sort of feel that it honors the pieces in the way that we want to honor them, gives them the space to have those sort of tactile interactions with the visitors. So that's why you'll see my hands touching the pieces today. I will be picking some of them up for up close views as Neebin sort of guides us. And you'll also see them on a separate screen, sort of highlighted on our working table. So that's the broad introduction, and I'll pass it over to, I think we're going to Rachel next. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Rachel. I'm the president and executive director at the Co Center, and I don't know if some of you are new to the Co Center, but our mission is connection and learning through Indigenous arts, and we're dedicated to increasing public awareness, education, and appreciation of Indigenous art through our programs, exhibitions, and individual study. And we do like to take, as Bess referred to, a very hands-on approach, which has become very unique for us in that we're doing it in a virtual setting rather than in real life. So I will keep this brief. I hope you guys really enjoy this this sort of rough and tumble experience. And I want to thank First American Art in America very, very, very much for coming to us and wanting to partner on something. And so this has started this exciting series. And I want to thank Neebin, who is our second artist to join us. And so it should be great fun. So thanks again so much.
Yeah, and this is a partnership, as Rachel said, between the Co Center and First American Art Magazine. So we are a quarterly print and digital journal covering art of the Americas, North and South America. So we really like an eclectic and broad approach to what Native American art is and challenge all those pitiful little stereotypes that need to go away. Thank you all for joining us today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Neebinnaukzhik Southall, who is my dear friend and one of my favorite people on the planet. So she's a member of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation. She's based in Santa Fe. So she's traveled quite a bit from Ontario, so it's always a pleasure to see work from your own community. She's an artist, a graphic designer, a photographer, a writer. She writes for First American Art Magazine. She today will discuss the aesthetics and iconography of historical Ojibwe quillwork, birch bark, and textile artworks that we'll see today. And she'll touch on how she respectfully incorporates Anishinaabe aesthetics and designs into her own artwork and graphic arts. So Neebin.
Thanks everybody. Yeah, so my name's Neebinnaukzhik. That means summer evening in the Ojibwe language. A lot of people call me Neebin. Some people call me Neebs, you know, that usually comes out on its own. I'm really happy to be with you all here today. I think the Co is a really wonderful resource. You know, when I saw that they had such a huge collection of you know, items from the Northeast, both in the US and Canada, I was really excited about that because, you know, here in the Southwest, of course, naturally, the focus is on tribal material here, so to have access to these things that are actually, some of which are from my region and are familiar. I didn't grow up in Ontario, but my family would visit every summer. And so, it's really wonderful to have this connection here. So I'm really excited. There's some really wonderful pieces that the Co has that I'm really excited to dig into here. So the first thing that we're going to look at is a box, which I think, Bess, if you wanted to jump in there.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I think we'll switch over to that view. This is sort of funny. So America's manning the behind the scenes activity. So I'll have her I'll have her spotlight that view so that you all can see that. But so this birch bark box from the Co collection was made by Mamie Migwans. It's actually signed in quill on the bottom. I'll show you all that in a little bit. It was made in the mid 1980s, we imagine. She lived on Manitoulin Island. And what we know about her, and there might be some members of the audience who know more about her, but apparently she was a leader in quill work and birch bark boxes specifically. A lot of these, like the ones that you see here, which have still the bark side of the birch bark visible on the bottom of the box. So right here you can see it. And then I think Neebin will go more into the imagery of it, but it's a beautiful example. So it's got the quill work, birch bark, sweetgrass. Yeah. So Neebin,
yes,
you wanna?
Yeah, if you wanted to spotlight it there, if you could spotlight it, and we can talk about the knife a little bit too, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, the image is spotlighted, or?
Okay, maybe I'm not.
Well, do you want to continue and talk?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't
sure. Go ahead and talk.
Okay, so one thing that I really, this box really kind of jumped out at me, and, for multiple reasons. For one, my own family has made boxes of this sort of style. They're smaller, more concentric little boxes, but, this sort of thing where you're making something out of birch bark, out of sweetgrass, out of quill work. This is an art form that you really see in our region. And, so with this sort of box, you have it made with this sort of material here. It'd be a lot thicker for a box like that. But the thing that really stands out to me about this piece, though, is the imagery. So you have a depiction of the Ogawa Pictographs. And with that particular depiction, you have a canoe here up in the upper left corner, and then you have an underwater panther on the right. And I have an example of that really quick that I'd like to take you to with the screen share. Okay. One second here. So you can kind of see what she's referencing here. It's actually pretty close. She doesn't have the snakes in it, but she does have the canoe and the underwater panther here. So, something that's really significant about that is that this is an important being in Anishinaabe cosmology. And so you have like a structure of the world. You have the upper world, which is inhabited by like thunder beings, thunderbirds. You have us like in the middle world. And then you have the underworld with the underwater panther. And, a lot of that is, this is a very strong image to be using on a piece like this. And, when we're looking at the knife, we also see that this image is used as well. And Bess, if you wanted to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the knife is beautiful. It's such a stunning piece. So this is one of the earlier pieces that you selected, Neebin, to talk about today. This one is probably from around 1860. So we have, a vague amount of information. It was actually purchased by Tedco here in New Mexico from a local dealer. So we don't have its provenance beyond that, but we do know that that's where Ted acquired it. You know, the information that we have is from Ted's perspective. So he was curious as to whether what tribe it could have been from. He had sort of a theory on it that it could have been from someone that traveled amongst a variety of tribes or something like that. I'd love to hear your perspective on that, Neebin. But it's a really beautiful example of incredibly fine beadwork, as you can see. Probably the blade is not the original blade. I can pull it out. It is obviously early, but probably not the original blade, we imagine. Let's see if you can see that a little bit better. So yeah, I don't know. I think I really want to hear your insight on this, Neebin, and then I can also pick up these pieces for up close views while you're talking, which might be sort of helpful. You can see on this one, like it's got the little loops of beads down at the bottom right here.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and hold it up, that'd be great.
Okay. You can see also.
So,
could I interrupt you briefly? Could you explain, could you take it back a little bit and explain what Underwater Panther is?
So Underwater Panther is a spirit in Ojibwe and other tribal worldviews. It inhabits the waterways and the lakes, and it's a very powerful figure that at times is dangerous. You know, when people wanted a safe passage, they would often offer tobacco before they, you know, took a journey, a canoe journey. And some people, some medicine people that were very powerful were also associated with underwater panthers. A lot of times there's been a, I think in some ways a bit of a stigma about the underwater panther. It is a dangerous figure. Like our cultural hero, Nanabiju, does fight underwater panthers in a story, one of our important stories. But it's a very complex figure, you know, there's a danger there, but it's not necessarily like good and evil per se. Like when you have the underwater panther, it's like balanced by a thunderbird. And so it's really more about, I think, balance of the world is really a way to think of it. So having an image like the underwater panther on a knife shape, in my interpretation, I would see this as, it's like there's a power element that is being ascribed to this item. Putting an image like that on a knife, you know, on a personal item, you know, it could have been a protector perhaps, you know, I can't really, not knowing the exact context, but these are some guesses I would make, you know, just from knowing a little bit about that. Does that answer your question, America?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Neebin, do you think that you could share that one image again of the actual pictographs?
Oh, the Ogawa Pictographs, sure.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Just for a moment.
Yes, and so there's a lot of different pictographs, and this one particularly, I think, is the North Shore of Lake Superior. It's a very, you know, graphic image. You know, funny thing about this image is like, I actually saw it in one of the Godzilla movies in the title screen. I was like, oh wait, I know what that is. So you never know where this is going to pop up. But I think it kind of fits actually, you know, when you think about that sort of like power and distraction, right? I think that actually is not a complete stretch to have that as a tie-in.
Yeah. You know, I know we don't have a whole lot of information on Mamie Migwans, which is the birch bark box. But we do know that she was apparently the aunt of Carl Beams, who was a contemporary artist. He studied at IAIA, so who also really used a lot of this imagery. And according to the notes that we have, it was sort of actually Mamie was drawing upon his imagery when she was making these boxes. So I think that's sort of an interesting narrative to think about in terms of how you go on to use your images too, and how there's all of these layers of artists interpreting and reinterpreting this imagery.
Right. And, you know, there's something that we really need to think about as artists, we really need to think about as artists and designers is, you know, that we make sure we understand the context of the images that we're using. And not everybody is going to have the same conclusion about, you know, the appropriate way to use these things, but because they are such prominent figures in Anishinaabe cosmology, you know, we really should be mindful of that. You know, this sort of birch bark box would have been for sale, you know, and so there's some interesting questions around that. Like, what does that mean, you know? And you know, I can't be a judge of that, but it is an interesting conversation, right? And when you think about Native people and how we've, you know, gone through the process of assimilation, changes in religious beliefs and all of that, you know, the impact of something or understanding of it can really shift, right? And, you know, this is something that I, you know, thought a lot about and struggled myself. And I'm going to pull up a piece that I made based on work that I had done a couple of years back. So here we go. Just sharing the screen here. Did it do it? Okay, here we go. So this is a piece that's entitled Who We Are, and it's based on a project that I had done when I was an undergraduate at Oregon State University in the design program. It was based on, I did some t-shirt designs, t-shirt and hoodie designs at the time, you know, after some cultural exploration. You know, I did a lot of research. I was looking at, you know, different collections online. I was reading books. Like, I really did a deep dive. And, you know, there was a lot of things I didn't know at the time. You know, I was only 18 or 19 years old at the time, you know, 18, 19, 20, 21. I think when I graduated, I was, I think 20. But so when I was like doing my research, you know, I realized I didn't really know that much about some of these things. And I knew that I had wanted to understand these things and reclaim things, you know, for my own artwork here. And I did think a lot too, you know, I really struggled with what is the right way to use this image. You know, am I dabbling in something I shouldn't, you know, but I really hope that what comes across is, you know, the intention for a reclamation. And I'll explain this piece a little bit more. So in this piece, with all my historical research, I saw how there was a lot of shift in our visual culture, you know, from contact through the 1700s, through the 1800s. There was a lot of changes that happened within our visual and material culture. You know, we adopted a lot more florals in the work, you know, the beaded florals that we're really known for today, you know, was not an aesthetic that we exactly had before. There's like, you know, certainly elements of it, of commonalities, but so I was looking at the florals as the more of like, this is a more contemporary thing. And then I was looking at some of our older imagery, the thunderbirds, the underwater panthers. I was looking at, you know, our pictographs. And so this really kind of combines a lot of these different qualities. And so you have the thunderbird as the upper world, you have the underwater panthers below, and then in the middle, you know, you have really like your four directions there too, right? And then you have like this floral, so that all of this stuff can coexist. We can hold all these aspects of our history, of the way we've changed and adapted, and also hold our past with us. And so that's really about like a lot of different things that I was talking about in this piece. And I hope that that, you know, respectful intention of cultural reclamation and pride really comes through. So that's, you know, one instance where I was using that design. I have a work I did for a client too that also references the Underwater Panther. And so my client is Anishinaabe, is with the Native Justice Coalition. And so we had discussed, you know, how we wanted this conference design to be. And we were looking at the time in which the conference was taking place. And so I was looking at Ojibwe constellations and seeing like, thinking about that, thinking about a lot of different things, thinking about a community coming together, you know, for the time period. There's certain things that were in the sky at that time. You know, you have like your, you know, I think it was like the North Star perhaps, and then also like a lodge. And so I was incorporating these elements, and then also people coming together. And the way these figures are drawn, it references some of our pictograph style. And then the Underwater Panther is, you know, combining some different qualities, but also draws from nettle fiber bags. So you kind of have a lot of different layers coming into this. And with our intention, you know, my client is very much about having a very strong Anishinaabe identity, uniting Anishinaabe people, and also, you know, like really centering that and the other tribes in the region. My client's in Michigan. And so, you know, we're really kind of, when we're doing this work, it's really about sovereignty as Anishinaabe people. And, you know, when you have a flyer like this go out widely, you know, there's a lot of things that are happening. You're having something that's culturally recognizable, and you're also perpetuating culture as well. And, you know, the usage of the Underwater Panther in this instance, you know, my client had wanted to show sort of like a protective side of it instead of having always like this really negative way of looking at this entity. So I guess we could move on. So I think if we wanted to move on to the next knife and sheath, I think that would be a good option.
Yeah, so this is on the hot speed. So just for a second, it's like, what could you talk about the materials? Like, that's a porcupine quill work box. So for someone who might not be familiar with quill work, could you discuss that?
Yeah, so you have like these different, so the porcupine quills, I have some examples here. So let me just pull these little guys up. If you could switch over to me, America.
Sorry for, yeah, I'm trying to, sorry for my bad camera work.
I don't know if it's pulled up yet. I don't know if I'm on the screen.
You're well, yeah. Sorry, yeah, you are. Please talk.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just confused because it was showing you for that moment.
Yeah.
So so here we have some porcupine quills here, like raw form. Someone would take something like this and you would soak it first. Like you could some people would, you know, soak it in their mouths and hold it in their mouths until it's pliable, and then they would you know, work it through the birch bark. And I think you'd also have a you'd have to be able to pierce the birch bark, of course, but so this is what you would use for that. And then here's some colored ones as well. I've taken a few workshops and I have to be honest, I'm not very good at it. It might seem simple, you know, you're like, oh, I could do that. But I took a workshop with Juanicia Misquades. I'm not quite sure how to say her last name, so apologies. But I took a workshop with her and she took us through the whole process, you know, had everything like cut out and kind of prepared for us. And, you know, there I was and I was doing really well, but, oh, I snapped the birch bark. So, you know, this particular piece that we were looking at, it definitely is a lot of expertise and talent to make something like that.
Neebin, I'm gonna just hold this up for just a second, the other birch bark, the box, just so that people can see maybe a little bit more close up. Sort of does interesting things in front of this camera, the computer camera, but just so that everyone can see some of the detail. You can see the dyed quills around the trim.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on. The texture is incredible.
A lot.
Yeah, it's
right.
subtle.
And she's just mostly using the natural quill here too. You know, you can see that the white and the browns is that natural. And then there's, I think, that little red there is her signature, if I remember right, from the paperwork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what we have that as. And then let me see if I can hold this up on the base, just so that people can see her lovely signature on the base.
Oh, that's large. That's really.
Yeah, it is. So
That's so cool.
There's that. And then this is, I don't know, I have the other knife on the table. I'm going to see if I can get it a little bit closer, Neebin, and then I'll hold that up too. So
okay, that would be great. Yeah.
As well.
Cool.
So you can start talking a little bit maybe about how you chose this piece, and then I can give some more information from the coast perspective about it in the collection.
Well, when I saw, Bess and I were going through, you know, the collections online, and when I saw this, I got so excited because I didn't know that Co had something like this. You know, this is a very early piece. And part of the reason how you can tell this is because of that dark brown background that the quill work is on, and the quill work itself. You know, in the 1700s, you would see a lot of early pieces that were dyed with walnuts. And, you know, like I have an example of like, this is the walnuts. And most of you know what a walnut is, but people would make dyes out of this and dye the hide with that. And so this is like an earlier aesthetic that I really love, and something that when I see, you know, pictures of this, I get super excited about it. So let's see if we can take a look at this. I'm gonna take a look here. Yeah. So, you know, it's very elaborately decorated. You know, there's all these patterns. You have waves made with quill work, red and white checkered marks. And I believe so what was this? This was from 1750, correct?
Oh my gosh, wow.
So
very early.
it's very early, and it's hard to come across pieces like this, or to even have access to a piece like this. Like I think a major institution, I think it would be very hard to see something like this. And there's not that many examples either. There's definitely some, but I just really like, seeing just how elaborately decorated this is. I just think it's like representative of really like Native people can make art out of anything. And I think we see that with all the masks that people are doing now. Like it's that same thing of like that ornate, elaborate decoration, right? And so I just think that's the sort of, we come from this trajectory, right, of a love for decoration and meaning. So yeah, so that's something that I look to. Seeing this, you can see how detailed the quill work is on this, the applique. And this is what people were doing, this kind of applique before we moved over to beadwork, right? But I think that there's definitely a tie-in of like, this method you're attaching. It's a little bit different, but I think we use something like beads coming in, and it fit into like the technology really that we already had, right? So yeah, so this is like pretty exciting. From the item notes, I don't believe it was, oh, there's a question. Is that quill work on leather or bark? It's on leather. So quill work decoration, it can be used on a lot of different things. In a lot of older items, you will see a lot of quill work applique. So you would take something like sinew and a sinew and like a bone needle, like in the old days, and use that. There's a lot of quill work resurgence now. You can go to a number of different art shows and see amazing quill work being done today. So it's really nice also, I think, for the artists that are working today to know that this is a resource that they can go in and look at this and see how something was originally done. And this particular thing, I don't think it's attributed to a specific tribe, but this is a style that many different tribes would use in the Great Lakes area.
So I might bring these around to the front, which I think has a slightly better camera, so that you all can see up close. I think the color maybe might come through a little bit better on this.
Oh yeah, there you go. You can really see better.
Yeah, I don't know why the color's so strange on the other one, but.
And
so,
would you all care to talk about the dyes?
I don't
These are all
know them
natural
in depth.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, Neebin. You go.
Oh, I just said I don't know what was used for the red in depth or anything, but like, you would use natural dyes for quills back in the day. Nowadays, people use stuff like grit dyes and whatnot. And then that hide backing is dyed with walnuts, which I showed earlier. It's just these little guys here, and there's a whole process to it. These can really dye your hands too, so you have to know what you're doing. Something I want to do down the road, but haven't quite gone there yet.
And if you want to see, here's the blade.
And the notes had mentioned that there's like a Thunderbird motifs on here. And so, I think that's maybe a little bit to interpretation, but, the hourglass, yeah, the hourglass motif, when you see representations of Thunderbirds, you often have a very strong hourglass in the body. And that is quite possible. And again, when we think about the other knife, the idea of personal power attached to an item, an object like a knife, is significant.
Right. And that one, Neebin, I'm just going to hold that one up too, just to go back to this other sheath, which I don't know if everyone was able to see this part. There's the hourglass motif there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about back in the day, having a knife would be something that you would use all the time. Like it could be a weapon, but it was definitely a useful item that you would be using in the everyday. So having these sorts of personal items were very significant. It's different than, maybe it's not like you're just in the kitchen or something. It's like, no, these are very important tools for everyday living. I think we can move on to the next piece.
Great.
So I've heard that when people begin practicing with quill work, sometimes teachers will use straws, so plastic straws, just to kind of experiment.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure where I had put mine, but I had taken a workshop with an artist at IIA, and she used those paper straws and had us tack down and use like sewing thread and everything so that we understood the method. And then from there, we then were able to do some little pieces. And I know that I have some examples of that, but I'd have to like run and get it.
Next time.
Yeah. So now these ones are, I think, showstoppers. When I saw these moccasins, I was like, we have to do these. There's so much going on. And one thing that I'm so excited about is that these moccasins are from Ontario. And so to be able to see something that is from my particular like branch of the Ojibwe is really great. Now they are more toward Quebec, I believe, is what the catalog notes had said. And they're, let's see here, they're from 1840, so pretty early. Great example of so many different techniques, and materials. You have the hide, you have, I believe it's velveteen, velvet or velveteen on the vamps and then the the cuffs. Let me take some water here. Sorry, all this talking. And seeing this ribbon work, and then also, bead work. Like there's so many. This is a masterful piece. So many techniques coming in here. I'm really intrigued by this central motif on the moccasins. I personally don't know specifically what this means. And this is where if I, as a designer, I'm looking at pieces, doing historical research, I wouldn't just use something like this, like without knowing. I would want to do a little bit more digging into seeing what this means. I think there's some educated guesses you can make about it. Like, the fact that it's in 4 different directions, like, I think there's probably some sort of cosmological tie, or, it could be a decorative floral kind of element. But, personally, I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
Quickly. Okay, so Cayuga beadworker Tammy Rear has called this a celestial eye, and I just think that's handy because once you have a name, then you'll start seeing it everywhere. So this, you will see, Atlantic Canada down to Florida, you'll see the same pattern, and it's usually associated with women, and I think you're absolutely correct, associated with the 4 directions. And then it's got a spout too, but.
And I think it's worth noting too, like, for the Ontario Ojibwe, we are right next to the Haudenosaunee people. And when you see some stylistic shifts of like Anishinaabe people, the people that are more on the plains are more like plains people. And I think that there's probably, I'm sure that women were, seeing each other's work at this time. That heavy use of like the white beads is something that's very Ojibwe, but is something that you also see with a lot of Haudenosaunee people as well. So I think there's some interesting things that you could draw from that. I love having a reference for these sorts of examples. I do a lot of illustrations, fashion drawings on my own, and having access to a piece like this is great, for referencing the work to understand better, the materials, where things come from. And I am working towards making a pair of moccasins myself. And so when you have these really great examples available, it's just, there's just so much going on here that is incredible. And I think it would take a lot of time. It'd take a lot of skill and a lot of time to make something like this.
Yeah, these pieces are really, really stunning. And maybe I'll bring one of them up to me just so that you can see, just in case the color isn't translating again.
Okay. There we are.
Thank you.
Those are large too. They must be men's, huh?
I don't, yeah, they are rather large.
I don't know. I'm a size 10, so. Yeah, so you can really see the interpretation of florals on this side here.
Exactly.
And one thing I've like noticed, like going in different collections, like I think how we do florals in Ontario is different when you're looking at like people in Minnesota. Like there's some different stylistic stuff that I haven't delved into deeply, but I think is worth exploring. And I think if you really wanted to look at, if you wanted to incorporate more of historical perspective in your work, I think this would be a worthwhile area to study. And, you know, when I'm doing design work, like I'm often looking at beadwork patterns and looking at like, you know, seeing how these things are zigzagged and everything like that is something that if I'm doing a graphic design work on the computer, I'll look at those sorts of things and think, how can I incorporate this aesthetic? I think we can move on to our last piece here. I see we're already kind of, you know, time is flying by, but this is a really great piece I'd love to talk about.
And we'd love to see more of your work too. I don't know, while we're waiting, do you want to show us your rabbits behind you?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's a great lead-in because, you know, talking about referencing, I have this piece back here, but I'm going to bring it up on the screen.
Okay, sure.
Just so I can see it a little bit better. So,
yay.
Yeah, so, you know, I love fashion, I love clothing, and when I'm looking at the collections in different institutions, I'm often looking at, you know, leggings, moccasins, all of that, and strap dresses. Well, I haven't seen I have seen one strap dress, I think, in person, but most of my experience has been looking online. And so for a piece like this, you know, there's like historical research that went into this. Like, it's like a cute little thing. It's actually representative of me living in Santa Fe as an Ojibwe person and the love that I have for the peoples and cultures here and the land. And so I've incorporated two different things. You have a Thunderbird design that is drawn from twine bags, that sort of geometric thing. And let me pull up really quick a book so you can kind of see what it is that I'm referencing. Let's see here. Give me 1 second.
And we can see the rabbit and the florals in your background too.
So, you know, looking at this sort of stuff where sometimes this is sacred usage, so it's good to be mindful of that and think about what your end result is and what you're incorporating things with, right? But this sort of technique with the bag twining and the way you know, the weaving and the geometry that comes from that, right? So let me just go back to the,
nice.
So you can kind of see where I've had the, okay, where are we at now? Sorry, I don't know if is the screen sharing for me right now?
Yeah, so we see your rabbit and we see the bag.
Right, and so there's you know, I'd combined some, like the Pueblo rain cloud. You see the Thunderbird drawing from what I had just referenced, and the clothing, you know, clothing references, you know, being accurate to some clothing here of the Manta, of the Pueblo Manta, having, you know, a jacla. And this is a little bit more based off of like Santo Domingo women's clothing. It's a little bit drawn from a friend of mine, her clothing. And then this other rabbit is drawing from an Ojibwe strap dress, which is a traditional clothing form that not that many people wear. Like I've, you know, started on my own dress and I've made the main dress part, but I still need to make the little kind of like cape, or the, sorry, words aren't working right now. You know, the little coat part, you know, I still need to make. But yeah, so having reference to these different objects in collections is really great, to have that actual physical thing so you can make them, and then also just to be able to look to things and reference in your work. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this bag. Yeah. So this was an item that I was really excited to see. I didn't realize that the Co had one of these in their collection. And so, you know, the twining example that I talked about, that's like a, you know, the earlier form. And then something like this is made with wool. And, you know, there's just so much patterning going on here. You know, you have an otter tail pattern in this really, you know, these big black lines. A lot of times it's referred to as an otter tail pattern, and you'll see that in beadwork. It just kind of comes up a lot, that sort of motif. And so as a graphic designer, you know, I look at this sort of stuff and think, how could I incorporate this in a work that I'm doing, you know? And I really tend to like break down the different components, you know, sketch this stuff out, and then reinterpret and think about how I can do that, and you know, do work digitally. I have like an example of a piece where I was looking at beadwork, specifically bandolier bags, and that this ended up influencing, I don't know, did it do it? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So it influenced this border design for an article that was written by an Ojibwe author. So it's just kind of like tying in and doing something that this is appropriate and this makes sense with this. I'm bringing culture into graphic design work. So like, you know, if you're looking at a pattern on a bag or beadwork, especially when you look at the bandolier bags with that really geometrical loom beaded work, this is like a great way to think about that and think about how you can apply it. This is just a sort of little personal graphic that I had done and used on like a portfolio. And so, you know, you see some of this otter tail pattern, that black, you know, those black like little boxes that kind of went around. You can see that on the outer perimeter and also in the second line in that light green. So there's just so much that you could be thinking about and considering when you're going into collections that could really inform, I think, a lot of cultural reclamation, inform a lot of cultural sovereignty, that we have such a wealth of material to draw upon. We have such rich cultures. Every single you know, tribe has so much behind them, and how can we honor that history of ours? How can we bring that into our work as artists, as designers? You know, it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And whenever I can work on an Anishinaabe project, absolutely, you know, it's all about bringing in Anishinaabe visuals.
Do you want me to open this so that you can see? I always like to see
Yes,
sort of
let's
the
look at
inside.
it.
Okay.
All right.
It's really, it's impressively large too. So, let me see.
And that's wool, that's not basswood?
Yeah, that's a wool. Well, originally they would be made with basswood and other fibers.
And there's kind of a revival of that happening right now in the Great Lakes, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe Renee Dillard is making bags like these right now.
Wool.
So there's a lot you can look at, you know, looking at the colors that are used, designs. Like if you're say, you know, making a poster for an Ojibwe event, you know, how can something like this, you know, influence your design work? And I think there's just, you know, there's so much richness out there, and we really need more graphic designers and artists to be thinking about this, doing the research, and, you know, going about learning as much as you can, so you're not just slapping this on things too. I think it's important to say that, you know, you wouldn't want to take something like, you know, an Underwater Panther and put it on a chocolate bar. You know, that's not really necessarily like the right thing to do. But learning as much as you can about what motifs mean. Like there's a lot of design work that even with as much as I've read, I still don't fully understand what the significance might be, you know? So I think it's good to be humble, be open to people's opinions, like, you know, respected people, elders, and see what they have to say, and, you know, modify. I think put your best foot forward, but, you know, modify your behavior if there's any issues or problems that are being caused by the work that you're doing.
Did you want to show more your work? And then to the audience, if you have questions, we can't unmute everyone, not that we're censoring you, but just feedback will happen. So yeah, please share any questions, and Neebin's happy to answer them for the conclusion of our discussion.
Okay, so yeah, I'll show a couple of different things here. We'll go back into like looking at this here. So, you know, when I'm looking at beadwork, you know, a lot of times I'm making sketches just so I can have that understanding, have a real true understanding, because when you're looking at, there's so much information that can be in a piece. So I like to break them down into different like components and really kind of take an understanding. When I was an artist in residence at OCAD University a few years ago, I was looking at, okay, what sort of motifs do you see in some of our floral beadwork? And so you know, when I'm doing some artwork, I'll look at that and say, okay, well, you know, what can I use? How can I reuse this? As an artist myself, I keep a sort of a repository of all my sketch studies that I've ever done. And when I'm working on a new design project, I'll incorporate that. you know, so one of the things when I was in residence, I was looking at those florals, making my studies, and then I came up with these different designs. And these are freely available. These were meant to be used by community and really anybody, you know, because the floral beadwork has a really cross-cultural history. It was really important to me to make something like this available so that people could use it however they wanted to. But specifically, you know, I would love to see people doing beadwork. I would love to see people, you know, using different designs for organizations. Like really, there's a real lack of resources, and my intention is to have more of these sorts of things available. And, you know, one of my clients, you know, has used florals quite a bit, the florals that I designed in their own work, promoting the organization. And this is something that is like the best that I could hope for, really, is to have these sorts of visuals out given back to the community, seen by the community. And so you can see that my client had used a floral, my floral motif on the top of this postcard. They laid it out. And this is the logo that I had done for my client. And here you can see that I'm referencing multiple things, you know, twine bags for one, because it's such a powerful thing that really unites that area. And then also, you know, petroglyph art. And so this Thunderbird combines most of those two qualities. And then also this particular red is a reference to the sacred red paint that is within our culture that you will see it on within rock art. And so having these different references is just very important to me, you know, for our cultural sovereignty. This is another logo that I had done, you know, that was looking at a more contemporary art of, you know, the Woodlands art influenced by Norval Morrisseau with his heavy line work. So I was looking at that and then also bringing in the florals. And this is a depiction of a crane, which is one of, you know, our important clans. And my client has ancestors that are some powerful people in Ojibwe history. So a lot of this was referencing that and bringing that in to create a respectful cultural design.
So over the years, how have you been able to find your source material that has fed this vocabulary, this visual vocabulary that you've developed?
Well, you know, it's looking at, like, I have a very large library that I've built over the years. And so, you know, I have some different books here as well, you know.
Are these ones you would actually recommend for the audience?
Some of them, yes. You know, I think the one that I would like to point out, you know, is this particular book. It's more recent, but the thing that I really like about this one is that it's inclusive of Ojibwe both in Canada and the US. And as an artist, there's like so much visual reference here that you can really look at. And there's like facts and everything, like looking at us as a whole. I really enjoy this one personally, but I have like a massive library. You know, the thing that really started me off when I was an undergrad, like there were art pieces within this book that I was so blown away by when I saw this book. And, you know, it really kind of changed my thinking. Seeing these different bags and beadwork, and, you know, I mean, this is over a lot of different tribes, right? You know, like there's a lot of material in here, but there's some really wonderful works that are, you know, from the Great Lakes area. And, you know, I was so immersed in all of this looking online. You know, there's of course, museum websites are really great as well. Co is a great resource, you know, obviously, you know, looking at the collections of the Smithsonian. And there's like, I could provide a list if anybody's interested. I'd be happy to give some recommendations. The Royal Ontario Museum has works available, like online collections. I think any of these major websites that carry Native art, you know, great to look into, but contact me if you want more information on resources like that. So I guess, is there anyone who has questions?
I know, there's got to be some people that are curious. Well, have you tried working, you said you had the one experiment with birch bark and quill work. You have delved into beadwork though. Have you worked with textiles?
No textiles as of yet. Like this is the peak of my achievement, as far as it comes
You
to
designed
beadwork.
that.
Yeah, I did.
That's
Yeah. So I came up with the pattern, and these are made with different like leathers. Like a woman had given me some chamois, so that's what this one is made out of. And this one is, yeah, it was kind of an interesting story. I just started talking about art, and she was like, used to make purses and sell them, and then she was like, well, I have all this leather, and so she gave it to me. And then this leather was, I think I reclaimed this from something or another, I had, but yeah, so the extent of my beadwork so far is really doing, the edge work. But I have yet to truly delve into doing the applique work. I've taken some workshops, but I don't really have any fleshed out pieces. I also do, earrings and such. Like, so if you want to buy some from me, let me know.
So why exactly rabbits? Because we can obviously see that you paint rabbits, but you also make sculpture.
That really comes from, that's my family. When I was really little, one of my very first stuffed animals was a rabbit called Wabusa. So Wabusa is rabbit, right? In Ojibwe, I think specifically a snowshoe hare. The little bunny I had was like a little white bunny. And that was like one of my earliest stuffed animals. And I kind of had a bit of a rabbit obsession when I was little. Like I loved anything about rabbits, like, Peter Rabbit, those illustrations. I think I was just kind of fascinated by that. And so like as an adult, I think a lot of times the rabbit thing it's about a way of expressing love and tenderness. Like when I think about when you're a child, how you feel safe and you have these things and you're fascinated, I think it's a way for me as an adult to express really the love side of things, and have a soft way of like people relating. Plus with rabbits, like anybody can relate to like a rabbit. Like you don't have specific facial features. It's like when someone sees that, and it's partly the response thing too. When I put the rabbit work out there, people get so excited. They're like, oh, so cute. And people of all ages, like you have people who are elders getting excited, you have kids get excited. So that's part of the appeal, is just to have that positive emotional connection with other people.
So Amber Dubois Shepherd, who maybe you've met at Indian Market, but hopefully you'll meet here in Oklahoma. She's Navajo, Prairie Band, Potawatomi, and Sac and Fox. She would be interested in finding more about Potawatomi and Sac and Fox designs that are related to Ojibwe. Would you happen to know any resources? And Bess or Rachel, you might also have ideas.
I think I would like to compile a list. Like make sure you give me your, if you could type your email in the box, I'll come up with a list of resources for that. I think, again, of course, general NMAI, I'm sure would have Potawatomi examples, and probably Sac and Fox too. Yeah, great. Like I'll do a little bit of digging for you. I'll do a little bit of digging and then see what I can kind of find. But I think, yeah, some of those major institutions are always a great first start. And then, sometimes you have to do a little bit of digging with books. Some books are really kind of terrible. Like I've had some that were really not great, and sometimes it's a bit of trial and error, but yeah, I'll compile something for you.
I could say, I know that prairie area that's kind of south of the Great Lakes, it's kind of in between, so you don't get as much focus there, but someone who really pays a lot of attention to that area is, oh gosh, help me, Gaylord Torrance from the Nelson Atkins Museum, that's right in Kansas City. So they have a small collection, but he does have tight connections with Meskwaki people in Iowa. So he's someone to look at, and Nelson Atkins is a museum to look at for Sac and Fox material, Meskwaki.
Okay, great. And I'm actually, my next design project, I'm doing some research on Potawatomi clothing, because the illustration is more geared toward a Potawatomi audience. So I know I'll have resources come up when I'm doing this, so I'll send those to you.
And then you were discussing strap dresses and working with Cecilia's company. Aha. So yeah, so an artist here was inspired to make her own strap dresses with ribbon jeans.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know this person, and
I'm going to unmute her. She can speak on her own behalf. So you're unmuted if you'd like to join the conversation.
Now, I don't know if I'm saying your Ojibwe name right. Awanagijik is two-spirit, and so, uses like they pronouns. And Awanagijik does amazing quill work art. I'm like really impressed by, the work that Awanagijik does. And I don't know if you're able to talk. I don't know if you can say anything, or if, I don't know if your computer's set up for that. But if not, go ahead and type your like Instagram so we can share it with everybody.
Yeah, so we can see more.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yay.
I don't know, what did you want me to share?
So tell us a little bit about you. I know that, you were a student at IIA for a little bit, but really I'm like so impressed with, your quill work and your birch bark work. And just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So, you brought up II. The thing that originally inspired me to go there is my dad actually went there in the 80s. He's a mixed disciplinary artist. He took it while it was still at the university, and he took 2D and 3D. So growing up, I was inspired by art, seeing his airbrush, his metalworking and different things. But then when I was younger, because my art, how do I put this? How inspired I was to do art with all the different artists around me, I ended up being a part of a federal program at the tribal schools here. And the school I used to go to, they had gifted and talented. So I ended up taking GT art and then also math and science at the same time. And I learned how to do quill working in 3rd grade. And I've been doing it on and off throughout the year.
Gosh.
So
That's
I've
awesome.
been a quill worker about 20 years. And
Wow.
I've taught recently 4 artists. And then last summer I taught 30 students, 7th, 8th, 9th graders. So
That's fantastic. So next generation.
yeah. Right now I'm working more towards getting a hold of rare materials that are moose hair, and trying to get a hold of more appropriate bird quill pelts. The Hidatsa used to use langles. I think there's a more proper name than that, but the seagull things. So they would use those more often. And Hidatsa, I live in North Dakota, in the Turtle Mountain Res. So Hidatsa are within our same tribe. I mean, within our same state. Excuse me. So I have 2 dual focuses. One being the revitalization of ancient arts, and then also the other one pushing a more contemporary approach. I'm actually working with a show to build futuristic beadwork and computer programming and technology here soon. It's gonna be
Awesome.
Please share your Instagram or your website via the chat box. I think we'd all love to see your work.
Absolutely.
I hope that's shared. Thank you for letting me.
Putting you on the spot.
I'm so glad that you
Oh,
joined. I was really hoping you would, actually.
Quick thing. I know it was pressed for time, but you guys, I got a little carried away with art thing, but the strap dress was actually inspired. I was a part of Cecilia's. It's the name of the company is eluding me right now. Social Racial Coalition, something, I can't remember it offhand.
Yeah, the Native Justice Coalition, and they had put on a conference that Awanagijik had attended. And I had done artwork for one of their healing stories where I created a graphic where there's some two-spirit people. And I can pull that up and share it really quick so you can see what is being referenced. So give me 1 second here.
All right. And for anyone who has to leave, we'll be back here next week. So we hope you can join us again.
So this is the artwork that I had done for Cecilia Rose LaPointe's organization. And so this is representing different people, different genders within Ojibwe culture. And so it was for like a space for people to talk about different issues. So I had made represented a strap dress on the person who's called an Agakwe, and has like a female role in the society. And so this is one of the very, older forms of clothing. And so I thought it was important to do that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for spending this time with us. And thanks to the Co for letting us do this. And We'll be
Yeah,
back.
miigwech. Ooh, I see that there's some other Ojibways in there. I see some chimiigwiches.
Mhm.
Yeah, chimiigwich.
Yay.